Hey there, beautiful souls. Welcome to InnerViews, the podcast where we dive deep into the realms of therapy, healing, and intentional living. I'm your guide on this adventure, Ivory. Are you ready to embark on a transformative journey with me? Whether you're navigating the complexities of trauma, embracing intentional parenting, or seeking self-help strategies, this podcast is your sanctuary. InnerViews is not just a podcast, it's a community. A safe space where stories unfold and healing takes center stage. Your story matters. And here, courageous storytelling is the heartbeat of our existence. We'll be exploring powerful themes like healing, navigating the intricacies of foster care, the strength found in survival, the beauty of reclamation, and the pure bliss of joy. So if you're ready to join hands with a community that understands, subscribe now. Let's walk this path together because the journey toward understanding and well-being starts right here, right now. Welcome to InnerViews, where every step is a celebration of your resilience and a testament to the incredible strength within you. Let's make this journey unforgettable. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you so much for tuning in to InnerViews today. I'm super excited about our guest. Miss Martina, can you please tell us who you are and a little bit about your story?
Absolutely. I am Montina Myers Galloway. I am a licensed clinical mental health counselor in the state of North Carolina. I have been in private practice for nearly 10 years now. So it was 8 years this past November. I am based in Charlotte, North Carolina. I have a group practice called Myers Galloway Counseling, where we specialize in helping Black women heal from the negative mental health impact of parentification. What parentification is essentially when Black women have been responsible in one way, shape, or form for either the emotional care or the physical care of an adult or siblings from a very young age. And some of my clients have been caregivers in some way, shape, or form since as early as 6 years old, if you can even imagine that. And so that is what we do.
Thank you so much. I think we connected because you read one of the stories that I wrote on adultification and parentification. I can drop that link for y'all in the show notes, but I talked about my experiences. And I believe you said 6 was the youngest age that you experienced. That my first memory of parentification was like 4. And it was first
Mm-hmm.
went into foster care. And I had someone look me in my eyes, my little 4-year-old toddler baby eyes, and tell me I had to take care of my younger sister. At
Yeah.
4.
Yeah. Yeah. And those are, when I say 6 years old, I've kind of heard my clients share those experiences from that age. And I think my experience with it, so my father has been clean from substances now for over 20 years. And so that resulted in my parents getting divorced. And, as a single mother, it is definitely challenging. And so that kind of put me in positions that, of course, I would have preferred not to be in. But as I started to see more Black women show up with this heavy weight, heavy emotional weight, mostly of feeling responsible for other people, I started to be curious about like, okay, what is this that I'm seeing? What is this called? And so here I am. My practice has evolved over time, and I've learned so many tangential issues that are related to what puts children in this position of having to survive even before they're developmentally ready to.
I'm so excited for this conversation today for so many reasons. But like, aside from the fact that you're just an awesome person and I really enjoy talking to you outside
We
of
vibe. We vibe.
we vibe. We have a vibe. Yes. But this is such a big issue and it doesn't
Yeah.
start or end with child welfare. I mean, we could really trace it back to the transatlantic slave trade, right? And having families be separated. Family separation is a really big, I think, conduit of this issue. And so we separated families from one another. We had children who were taken on those slave ships without their parents, without their family members, right? Being shipped off as commerce to
Yeah.
what we know as the slave trade. And then
Yeah.
we can't even begin to imagine the horrors of the slave trade
Yeah.
and what that looked like for Black families and Black children in particular. I know I'm getting on my soapbox, so feel free to bring me back in.
I love a good soapbox.
But listen, this is relevant, y'all, because and a
Yeah.
lot of people don't understand the history of slavery in America in the American context. But slave children were often given to the children of the masters, right? The children of their the white families over the plantations. And so from a small age, and I'm talking like, 1.5, 2, 3 years old, they were paired
Yeah.
with their owners who were their ages, sometimes a little bit younger, sometimes a little bit older. And so when we talk about adultification and parentification, this issue didn't just start with Black people or Black culture. This issue began with the transatlantic slave trade, and it is persisting, and it is
Hmm.
a nasty remnant of American history,
Hmm.
unfortunately. And so, what does that look like today? It looks like Black women who are stressed out because they've never known a life without parentification. They've never known a life without adultification. It looks like, if you're a teacher, because I always talk about being a teacher, y'all. It looks like those students who are just so bossy, right? And so difficult to get in line. But that's because they're responsible for so much once they leave school and go home. They're raising
Hmm.
children, they're cooking dinner, they're cleaning their homes, they're responsible
Hmm.
for
Hmm.
themselves. And so this is a
Hmm.
deep-seated issue. We need to understand the history of it. And today, Miss Martina is going to walk us through some things that we can do to kind of address that and prevent it. And what happens when we identify that we have experienced parentification and adultification. So I'm going to jump into our first question, if that's okay.
Hmm. It's okay.
Okay.
I'm ready.
All right. Martina, as a therapist dedicated to empowering Black women, you often address issues like parentification and adultification. So, how do these experiences uniquely impact Black youth in the child welfare or justice systems? And what can professionals do to support healing?
Hmm. Well, and first, like I mentioned prior to recording, I want to make it very clear, like it's very, very important that I preface this conversation with the fact that I personally have not been involved in the welfare system, but I have clients who have, and understanding and seeing their stories, I have a glimpse into what it was like. So, but my point of view is just coming from my professional experience, and it's coming from my desire to really get to the core and begin to eradicate this issue. So, regarding how to recognize it, and that was your question.
Yeah, so what can we do once we recognize it? How can we support the healing of it? And also, I guess, really importantly, how can we recognize it? Because I think that it's often
Mm,
dismissed or incorrectly labeled as, just behaviors that are difficult or challenging kids, challenging youth. How can we
yeah,
identify parentification and adultification? And what can we do to help support the healing from that at any stage, whether we be talking about youth, adults, elders? How can we
yeah,
address healing?
yeah. And I think the first thing that comes to my mind is the tendency or habit to put other people's needs before your own. And whether that be a child or an adult or whatever, but just the tendency to always consider someone else to the extent and at the expense of yourself. And I know you mentioned sometimes it can show up as maladaptive behaviors or destructive behaviors sometimes, but it can also show up as over compliance, right? If you think about someone not wanting to cause more stress, not wanting to bring about more conflict than there already is in the environment, it can also show up as over compliance.
That was me as a child because I was always like being more responsible than my peers. I was always, dimming
For
my own
sure.
light or my own feelings in a way that it probably read as really mature and really responsible. But when I look back, I'm like, oh, that was not developmentally appropriate. Like, that was not something that I should have had to show up as. And so I'm sorry, I
For
digress.
sure.
Okay.
No, I'm glad you said that because that resonates with me as well. I had a webinar last night where I kind of shared a part of my story, and that was an aspect of my story. The marching orders that I got was don't have no babies and do better than I did. And the challenge with that message is that there's lots of room for misinterpretation. There's lots of room for misinformation. But kind of getting back to what you mentioned in terms of how can we recognize it? It can show up as overly compliant. It can show up as the behaviors of sort of taking control of the environment and the situation as a child. But once you are recognizing those things, try to validate the child or the person for something other than what they can provide and how they perform. Validate them for who they are, validate them for just simply how they're showing up. And this is not a skate around accountability, but with an experience of parentification, you start to think that you're only worth what you can produce. You're only worth what you can do for other people.
Listen,
And
this is
that
not
is
supposed to be a
simply
personal session right now. Okay, I need you not put my business out there.
it's simply not true. And I find so many of my clients have issues with self-worth because it's been so attached to other things. And so I so deeply do not want that to continue to be our story.
That is so real. That is so real. I need a moment of silence for all of us who have experienced that because I feel like that is one of the biggest areas of work that I'm working on right now, separating my self-worth from how I can show up and perform and what I have to offer,
For
rather
sure.
than just being worthy because I am. Like, and the fact that I even have to still think through that, it shows you how deep this problem is. It really does show you how deep.
And I read, so when I first kind of like started to really develop the mission Myers Galloway counseling and choosing parentification as a niche, some feedback that I would get would be first, well, what is that? Nobody really knows what it is and what it means. But I have gotten the feedback, well, I mean, why only Black women? Like you're cutting off other women, like you're cutting off other working with other people. And just based on what you mentioned at the top of the show, in terms of just how deep it goes back and how many associated issues there are, we got work for days. like
It's a good place to
it,
start.
like I have my lived experience,
Mm.
right? I don't have the lived experience of another culture. I completely respect other cultures, but there's so much richness there already to address.
Absolutely. And there's a quote that I love when we have these conversations about equity and why are we focusing solely on a specific marginalized group. And it goes like, something along the lines of this: liberation for one is liberation for all. So if we take the most marginalized person in the group, we're undoubtedly going to be creating liberation for everyone else in the group. And so Black women, I
Mm-hmm.
would argue, are one of the most marginalized groups. If we have data that can support and show that, whether we look at it from a financial standpoint, whether we look at it at a health disparity standpoint, there's so many points of marginalization that exist that are data driven. And we're not prioritizing data because that would be a white supremacy ideology mindset, right? But we're elevating that it does exist in that capacity for those who need
For
that kind of
sure.
proof. But speaking of Myers Galloway counseling, so you focus on creating resilient families. So, how does
Mm-hmm.
addressing the mental health needs of Black women and caregivers specifically affect the outcomes for children in foster care, adoption, or kinship placements?
Mm-hmm. And so that was a perfect segue into that question and response because if 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 I'm happy in my family or healthy, I won't say happy, right? Because you're just not going to be happy with everything that
Oh, that's an
happens.
important
But
differentiation.
like it's just not the
Mhm.
way that life works, and I'm just coming to that realization.
Me too.
But if if I am healthy, if I am fulfilled, if I am if I have clarity and acceptance, I can give more. I can give more to my daughter. I can show up better in my marriage and in my relationship. And if I'm aware of the opportunities or the shortcomings and shortfalls, I can show up better. And giving Black women the resources, and I don't just mean finances, of course, that is a major aspect of it, but giving Black women resources and support in order to do that is critical. And that is a core of what we do. And so our approach at Myers Gateway Counseling is to focus on building support systems, developing core values, mindfulness techniques so you can manage the anxiety that you have because we are going to have them. And so a part of eradicating issues, I believe, is understanding what's happening and being able to manage it in the context of what you're experiencing.
Absolutely. And I would even go, so that's how we disrupt the cycle of child welfare engagement and involvement, right? We can have
Mhm.
Black mothers and Black caregivers show up with their cups a little bit fuller. That means they'll also have more patience.
Just a little bit.
You have more patience, you have more compassion, you have more understanding, you have more ability to show up and be present. And for children and youth, your presence, your attentiveness is sometimes the most important part of the situation, right? And so if we could
Mhm.
give Black women just a little bit more in their cups, maybe
Yeah.
we won't see as many Black youth ending up in care, ending up in the juvenile justice system,
Mhm.
ending up in the behavioral health system because their parents don't have the capacity to show up for them in the ways that they need to. So,
Mhm.
and thank you
Mhm.
again for the work that you do because it is invaluable. And I'm always going to tell you thank you for that. So,
I appreciate that.
yeah, you deserve your flowers. And if I had a bouquet, I would hand them to you right now. So, you recently hosted a retreat for Black women caregivers, offering them space for healing and connection. What insights from this
Mhm.
event could be applied to support foster and adoptive parents, especially those navigating the additional pressures of raising youth from traumatic backgrounds?
Absolutely. So, what I did not realize as we were planning the event and sort of creating the curriculum for the day is that essentially what we were doing was creating respite. We were creating an opportunity for the people who were there. We had 10 amazing ladies there. We had some amazing facilitators there. But what we were actually doing was creating space for them to attempt to address the things that they were dealing with. And I also did not expect the wide array of age range that were there. It just turned out to be such a healing space that also kind of resulted in a membership community. So we call our membership community legacy shifters. And so we're looking forward to having the people in that community create the culture for that community and create what we're calling our manifesto. And so they're creating their own marching orders to live by rather than what they've been told to live by in the past.
Thank you for sharing that. We're going to have that information in the show notes for y'all who are interested in attending that. And you mentioned the word respite, and I found that really interesting
Mhm.
because in foster care, that term in Allegheny County, Western Pennsylvania, is often used for when foster parents or adoptive parents need kind of a break from their children.
Right.
So they'll send them to respite, like a temporary home for their children to stay at, whether it be out of necessity of I have a work trip and I need 2 days of someone to take care of this
Mhm.
child, or maybe I just need a vacation away from all of my kids, and so I'm going to send them to respite. And so I found that a really interesting overlap. And we also need more safe spaces for marginalized people in general. I mean,
Yeah.
especially for Black women, but there are a lot of people who can benefit from small communities where, like you said, the opportunity to establish your own culture is there, the safety is there, the guidance of people whose profession, like yourself, it is to do this kind of work and facilitate safeness and help facilitate
Yeah.
healing. That is so, so necessary. Hopefully, I can get to one of these one day.
Hmm.
Come back
And
on.
so, yes, the people are asking for more, so we're going to try to build and accommodate that and make some tweaks here and there. But you really don't know what you're creating. You're just kind of following God, right? Like I had no idea that that's ultimately what it ended up being.
You are preaching today. I'm gonna need you to stop looking at my diary. Like, stop. Because it's like we make plans and then God laughs at us, right? We just never really know. And I think for me, one of the things that I'm dealing with is perfection paralysis. And so oftentimes I just have to push myself off into the deep end of the pool and then just figure it out as I go. And I don't know where I got that from, really thinking that things have to be perfect before we start. But one of the biggest lessons I'm learning this year is that you just have to start and things are going to be imperfect and you learn along the way.
And you live, and that's honestly the only opportunity that you really get to see. Like, oh, that's what it's like to be in the space. That's what it was like, and it was such a great learning opportunity. So yeah, I struggle with that as well. But this year has been definitely more of building the airplane while it's flying.
Oh, my favorite thing. Another thing
Literally.
I want to highlight for our audience is you mentioned intergenerational attendance. And so there were people, I'm guessing, from many generations in this group. And I wanted to ask a question for our audience so they could be clear on it. Is there ever an age at which you age out of adultification or parentification? I feel like I know the answer to this, but I wanted you to kind of
Mm.
audience for our listeners.
And also for the listeners, just a little delineation between parentification and adultification. And both concepts are nuanced, right? But adultification, the way I've read about it and I see it, is more a form of bias or a form of thinking that children are more adult than they actually are. And parentification within the context of a family system is the child taking on a familial or parental role within the context of a family. And so, one key thing and one key difference that I also try to keep in mind is the study by Georgetown Center on Law and Inequality, or the fact that most people see Black girls as adults is like, herein lies the issue. And I think that for me, I keep that stark difference in mind when I'm talking about it and when I'm addressing it. So there's the bias, there's the discrimination, there's the prejudice, that's what makes that also complex. And it can happen within the family as well. Like your family can treat you as an adult, but there's a little bit of a difference there. But your question was,
I think you broke it down for us. Well, I guess one additional thing is, can people age out of that? So once you turn 18 or 21, have you effectively aged out of those experiences? Or are there
hmm,
something that impact you, throughout your entire life that needs to be addressed at any point in life? But I want the audience to be really mindful of and aware of the lasting impact of adultification and parentification. It's not
hmm,
something that people just, once they turn 18 or 21, it magically disappears.
right, no, no, no. And so thank you for bringing me back and getting me off my soapbox. So no, it is not something that, okay, once you turn 18 you're legal, or once you turn 21 you're of drinking age. It's not like that. We're talking about deeply ingrained habits, like tendencies and emotional experiences that happen. And so when it comes to adultification, people in the United States believe that Black women need less nurturing, protecting, less support. So that's something that you don't have control over. So when it comes to aging out, no, it's unfortunately, it's not something that is that easy, but you do have to be mindful of the messages that were sent to you through your experiences
And then,
and give yourself the gift of that.
and don't repeat those same mistakes, right? One of the things I kept thinking of that I've experienced myself, but that I often see within the Black community specifically, is we will be quick to adultify young girls, say they're fast because of how their bodies are shaped or because of how clothes might sit on their bodies. We will adultify baby boys and say, how many girlfriends do you have? He's a baby. He doesn't date. He doesn't have a concept of gender yet. And we're putting romance and sex
For sure.
to
For
how we
sure.
talk about him and think about him. And these may sound like little things, but and
Hmm.
feel free to
Hmm.
correct me if I'm wrong. You are the expert in this, not me. But these are all small ways that we all engage, whether it be passively or directly, in
Right. Right.
adultification, that bias, that projecting adult behaviors and thoughts and actions onto kids.
Right. Right.
And
No, I completely agree. And
yeah,
say it again.
calling them out when we hear them, right? Like,
Girl, it grinds my gears sometimes when there are developmentally appropriate milestones that children go through, but the adults around them don't allow them that space.
Ooh, say it again.
And,
Back.
and it grinds my gears when there are developmentally appropriate milestones that a child should experience and the adults around them don't allow space for that. And again, we're not skirting accountability, but a 5-year-old doesn't know how to regulate their emotions. You have to reflect that back to them. That's the only tool that they have. Like you just mentioned, a little boy does not know about that he should have 5 girlfriends. Well, I guess I got to go get 5 girlfriends. Now that you've given me the marching orders to go do that,
That
now I have
programming.
to. I
Mm-hmm.
used that word with a client of mine the other day. That's why healing is it can be messy because you are literally unlearning the way that you've been programmed and trying to fit what you deem important into a new box.
And can I just feel free to correct me if I'm wrong? These experiences of adultification and parentification, they can often become our inner voices, right? And so that makes it incredibly hard to start the healing work, to maintain the healing work,
To
and
realize that you need it.
mm, the awareness of it.
And I think one aspect of my experience that I had to have a realization about was that I was over invested in the decisions of my family members, which also impacted me being over invested in the decisions of my friends.
Montina, again,
So, one way
no business out here right now.
I said me, audience. I just want, I ain't putting Ivory on Front Street. I said me. So, if you don't address that, one way or another, it's going to come out.
Ooh, I think I told you that I moved back to Pittsburgh recently after living in
Uh-huh.
Dallas. That is one of the biggest lessons that I'm learning. And that is a direct result of my parentification. That is a direct result of me feeling responsible for my siblings, for my best friends in a way that is like inappropriate almost. I mean, I love them and it's not inappropriate to love them, but I'm not their mother. And
And
that's
and
where,
I didn't even realize I was crossing a boundary.
mm, and they didn't realize it either. Like, we're just out here loving the way we know how to love. Right? We just out here loving the way that we know how to love, loving the way that love was modeled to us, loving according to our inner voices that are deeply influenced
Yeah.
by adultification and parentification, amongst other things. But
Yeah.
acknowledging something's not right, something's weighing on me.
Yeah. Something's off.
And this is something I realized a few days ago. So kind of attached to this, but not bring me back if it's not. And just that's okay because I go on tangents sometimes. I realized that I take a lot of responsibility for other people's feelings and emotions, more so than they even care about their emotions. So people will spaz out, they will crash out, as the kids say. And I will hold so much responsibility for that. And they don't even think twice about it. And I'm over here stressed out. I'm like, oh my goodness, like, with the work that I do, I have to hold space for a lot of people in a lot of different phases of
Yeah.
them. And
Yeah.
sometimes people will
Yeah.
crash out. I won't anticipate it or see it coming, but they will. And I will hold so much responsibility for that. And they don't think twice about it. And I realized I'm like, you gotta let that go. You gotta let that that person just cussed you out. They were so mean, so rude, so disrespectful, so out of pocket. And you're
And you
walking around
holding
thinking about
grudges.
that for yes, for days. And they haven't thought about it for a minute past it. And so I realized I need to let that go.
Yeah.
So could that be a remnant of adultification and parentification?
I think more a remnant of parentification than anything, because one thing that comes up often amongst my clients who have been parentified is having emotionally immature parents. And so when you have an emotionally immature parent, there are a few different things that happen, but either you're an externalizer or you're an internalizer, right? Either you holding it all in, like, okay, you self-reflecting, what could I do better? How can I prevent this from happening in the beginning? That is exhausting. And so when we talk about the inner critic that you mentioned earlier, or the negative narrative that you mentioned earlier, a few things that I hear people say are, well, or they don't realize that they think or feel this way, but it ends up coming out that they don't want to be a burden to other people, that that things are just automatically expected to them, or who am I to take a PTO day, or who am I to do XYZ. And so we don't realize these things are ingrained in us, but they are.
Mm-mm-mm-mm. And I know you did mention your own experiences, but it's just like it's overlapping too much. It's far too familiar. Goodness gracious. I knew this conversation was going to be good. I'm enjoying it. Thank you
Mm-hmm.
for being here again. Let me
Mm-hmm.
ask you our next question. So, your coaching program, Invested Insights, focuses on supporting Black women in corporate spaces, but many of those skills are likely transferable. What are some key mental health strategies you think foster care and juvenile justice professionals could learn to better support Black youth and caregivers in the system?
Mm-hmm. My first thought would be to practice your own self-regulation, to have a little grounding, because I do have like an array of client base. I work with some attorneys, I work with some people in banking, and I work with people in government and healthcare. And so sometimes those spaces don't always have the best supports, or the work environment is sort of messy. That's probably the best word that I can come up with. The work environments are often messy. And so it's not the first thought to self-regulate or to just be mindful of how their own stuff could be coming up, because you're just trying to get your job done.
Mm-hmm.
So at the very basic level, my recommendation would be to be aware of where you are, where you've been in your experiences. And I do think it's important to also think, well, what are you getting out of whatever you're doing, whatever role you're in? Because for some people, the rewards are intrinsic. Are you just trying to, let me just trying to get my check? Like, just to try to understand what's the motivation behind the role that you have in this situation.
Again, I just feel like you went inside my brain and and pulled out all the things because I swear to you, two things that have been resonating with me, especially I told you I just graduated from BACW, Black Executive Leadership Program that I was in. Thank y'all. Love y'all so much. Shout out to y'all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But two of the things that really resonated with me, because they were in some of our speeches as we closed out and graduated, is you really have to orient yourself in your purpose and you really have to anchor yourself to joy. So whatever that looks
Yeah.
like for you, you have to find your joy and you have to cling to that and you have to be absolutely crystal clear on what your purpose is. And I say that outside of finances and accolades, right? Even potentially outside of respect, even though those can be really big markers of success and pillars for
Yeah.
success. And a lot of the ways that we've been trained to think about it. But what is your purpose? You know,
Yeah.
like when you're on your deathbed, when you have your final moments on this earth, what are the things that you will have valued that you invested your time and your energy and your resources into? And that's not monetary. Um,
Mm-hmm.
as good as and fun as capitalism can feel sometimes, right? There's a lot of terrible aspects to it, but going shopping can be fun.
Absolutely, honey. And you can't do nothing without money. Like, let's just be
Okay,
real.
going on vacation is really fun.
It's
It's
fun
stressful.
and it's stressful when you don't have what you need in order to get what you need to get done. But
Absolutely.
at the end of the day, the programs and the companies and the services were created for me, for my company, for fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
I spent a long time in an environment where it just wasn't clicking for me. Like, to me, it seemed like it was being driven by something else that just didn't align with me. And so fulfillment is connection is really what I value most these days.
Mm-mm. So figure out your value. Figure out what brings you fulfillment. Cling to your joy as much as you possibly
Mm-hmm.
can. So, with your
Mm-hmm.
focus on racial disproportionality and mental health, what are some ways child welfare professionals can better address the emotional needs of Black youth who experience disproportionate representation and unique stresses in foster care and juvenile justice?
Yeah. And this answer might be painted by the value that I do place on emotional awareness and expression. But I would say, don't assume that they don't have emotions. Don't assume that they are not impacted in totality around what they're experiencing. So even though you have a job to do, even though you may have a reason to feel that you have to protect them, understand that it's a whole experience and their emotional experience, a part of that. Like their brains are changing, their bodies are changing at the same time that they're experiencing this traumatic event.
Acceptance. And I think that just as a Black community, come in, y'all. I have something to tell y'all, the Black community. Come.
Everybody listen to Ivory. Just quiet, quiet, quiet.
We need to be better at just accepting emotionality. We need to be better at validating the emotions of people around us and of ourselves. I always say that we can't give to others what we haven't first given to ourselves. So if we don't give
Yeah,
ourselves permission to have valid, legitimate feelings and responses, that's separate from how
yeah,
we react to those, right? But if we don't give ourselves permission to feel things and to just
yeah,
let whatever is coming up, come up and come out, if we don't give ourselves that permission, how can we give that to others? But when we're talking about Black youth, especially those who are systems
yeah.
involved, just giving that validity of like your feelings are real, your feelings are valid. Get them out, share them. We're not going to judge you. We're not going to medicate you. We're not going to put you in jail. Say what it is
Mm-hmm,
you need to say.
mm-hmm,
Say what it is
mm-hmm,
that you feel from how you've experienced this thing called your life.
mm-hmm.
And this is going to be a safe space for you to do that. And I'm not going to punish you for doing that. I think that's
Yeah,
a beautiful first step. And then, like you said, cultivating that awareness and giving them those emotional tools to develop their emotional IQ, their emotional intelligence, so that they can make more informed, better choices. But then the last caveat, and then I'll hop off my soapbox and let you get back to your expertise. The last part of that is making sure that we don't use that against them and that we
mm,
model what it looks like to make good choices, but also creating safe spaces for when they make mistakes.
yeah,
So expecting and allowing them to be imperfect, accepting and allowing them to be developmentally appropriate and making difficult choices, but
yeah,
also being there for them when they do, because that's a normal part of development, whether you're Black, white, yellow, orange, straight, male, female, adult, other,
yeah,
it's an important, relevant, normal part of existence. So being there for them when they do fall short.
yeah. Just to have the safety to experience that. And so I'm as we're talking about this, I'm thinking about one thing I used to do with my daughter. She's 5 now.
She's so cute.
Whenever we were having some challenges with her trying to express herself. Of course, now she's 5, she's learning how to do that. But I would give her this notebook and I would have her draw for mommy what it is that you're feeling and what it is that you're thinking. And she was probably confused, but at the end of the day, it kind of made her smile. If we are able to, in some way, provide a space or an outlet, but a way to get that from their head, from their heart out, just to get it out.
Mm,
I
mm.
think that's progress.
What you're referring to is also known as somatic practice. Am I not mistaken?
Mm-hmm,
Somatic practice is getting
mm-hmm,
those feelings and those emotions out of your body and into physical movement, right? And there's a lot of studies that
mm-hmm,
suggest that is a really important part of processing in a healthy way. It's not a maladaptive behavior when done appropriately. It can look like
mm-hmm.
dancing and shaking off the wiggles for little kids, right? It can look like
Right.
your child in ballet or karate as developmentally appropriate, which means they get to make that mind body connection and have that healthy movement, which also does a whole bunch of other things for the brain educationally and creatively.
Absolutely.
But it's a really beautiful way of helping youth to process their feelings and getting them out of their bodies, because when they don't get them out of their bodies, and you mentioned this earlier, you can be an external person or an internal person, right? I was an internal processor.
Mm-hmm,
I was
mm-hmm,
the
mm-hmm.
responsible, adultified, parentified, internal
I
processor.
got it.
Okay.
Everything's okay. I was on
Okay.
fire behind it. The closet is busting out with all the stuff that's in.
And you know what happened to me, y'all? You know what happened to me? I got a chronic illness. So we don't want to make ourselves or others sick by having them keep these feelings inside. And I think it can often be really easy to separate our feelings from our physical bodies, but feelings are attached to chemicals. And chemicals affect the way that our body operates. And chemicals, when long enough, like those stress hormones, cortisol, and all those other things that are not so good for us long term, when we sit with those chemicals in our body, that starts to alter and shift our DNA and damages our DNA.
Yeah.
This is something I'm always going to talk about too. I'm not an expert in it. Maybe one day I will be. But epigenetics, when we go back to
Yeah.
transatlantic slave trade, that really impacted our genes. The stress that our bodies went under. I could talk to y'all all day about it, but
Oh, I know you can, and I see who I'm gonna go to when I need to get like an encyclopedia reference or something.
oh my gosh. Also, let me tell you something. Our brothers and sisters who are still in West Africa, have you seen their bodies? They're very healthy and very strong. They have different issues, like, but honey, we come from great things. We come from great genes.
Right,
So
right,
all of these
right.
illnesses that African Americans in particular have, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, all these different issues, that's not stuff that we came over with. That is from years and years and centuries of malnutrition, of traumatic bodily injury from slave
Yeah.
masters, of terrible circumstances. And the Caribbeans was one of the worst place to be an enslaved person because they literally worked their slaves until they dropped dead in the fields and then they kept going. And so, our bodies literally have been waged war against for centuries and centuries and
Right.
centuries. And so the fact that we're still here, firstly, is a miracle in itself. And it's a beautiful thing. The other fact is some of us are still relatively unscathed after all of that. Like, my God. Goodness, do you understand
Right,
the
right.
blessing it is to have a physically healthy and strong body epigenetically after hundreds
Mhm.
and hundreds of years of abuse on your ancestors, your immediate ancestors? And for many of us, we could go back to our grandparents and our great grandparents, many of who were lynched, who were raped, who were tortured in this lifetime,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
My
And
grandmother turned 99 this year.
what a blessing.
And I could, she doesn't go there, right? She doesn't talk, but I can only imagine the things that she's seen and experienced.
The things that her body went through. And my quick little plug, because y'all know I'm also a doula, I'm super interested in that, is when
You are? I
I am.
didn't
I'll
know.
tell you more about it offline, girl.
Yes.
But I did it from my parentification because I was like, you know what? I love my sisters and my best friends. How can I be there for them when they're having their babies? Oh, you know what? I can't become a doctor. I can't become a nurse. I have access to become a doula. I'm going
I
to do
can be a
that.
dude.
Oh, I'm gonna have to book a session with you to unpack that. But a fun fact that I really like to mention because it ties back to the story of epigenetics and the impact of what we go through not only affects us, but generations to come, is that
Yeah.
when a woman is pregnant with a baby girl, that baby girl essentially has inside of her ovaries what will become her eggs in the future. And so when a woman is pregnant with a girl, she's carrying not only one generation, the generation of her child, but also the generation of her grandchildren. And so as women, when we're pregnant with girls, we're responsible for two generations outside of ourselves, right? And so,
Herein lies my focus on Black women. Herein
okay,
lies,
okay.
the importance of you being healthy and you paying attention to yourself and seeing yourself as worthy of the time to pay attention to yourself.
Yeah.
Girl,
And understanding that mental health and feelings that are attached to chemical reactions and things in our bodies are a part of that factor and do affect us
yeah.
genetically and epigenetically, right? And so when we say that our bodies are temples, yes, they house generations. Treat them like they are
As
sacred and
such, yeah.
holy as such.
Yeah.
All right. And
Yeah.
then one more thing I want to highlight for those who are data driven. There have been studies that show that rats who experience trauma for 17 generations after that one point of trauma. It took 17 generations for the impact of that trauma to not have an
Wow.
impact. Yes. And so trauma is
Wow.
a very real thing. Epigenetics is a very real thing. We need to be mindful of not only how we treat ourselves, but how we treat others, because as women, it impacts two generations when we're carrying children, and it can go as long as 17 generations, just one traumatic event. So
Wow.
I just want to throw it out there. But you know what? I need to get us back on track. We're almost at our time. And I'm enjoying this conversation. I hope this is not the last time that you come to visit us on interviews.
Oh no, it's not.
Okay,
And
okay,
next
okay.
time you come to the state of North Carolina,
Yes. Well, you
Please
know,
let me
my dad's
know.
side of my family is down there, so I'm going to be down there at some point or another.
Yeah.
Okay, let me get back on track. So, growing your
Yes.
practice has allowed you to reach more Black women, especially those affected by systemic inequities. What insights have you gained that child welfare and juvenile justice professionals might apply to help youth and families of color access culturally sensitive mental health support?
Ooh, that's a good one. And the first thing I thought about was therapy for Black girls. Going to
Yes.
or and therapy for Black girls is not the only directory, but where you tap into the resources are very important. Everybody's not going to be a good fit. Everything's not going to be perfect. All that, but who you partner with, who you have relationships with, is super important if you want to serve those who you are called to serve
Mhm.
effectively.
Absolutely. And I think that finding friends and family who are also interested in their mental health and well-being is a great pointing to start to point out as well. You know, because therapy
Mm-hmm.
for Black girls is awesome. There's also like there's a version of that for men, for Black men, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's like therapy for Black men. I could be wrong, and
Yep,
it should come up. But outside of that, if you're someone who feels like you need a more personal connection to the help that you're seeking, reach out to those who you know who go to therapy, who talk about mental health.
and
There's
who would support you in what you're trying to do, right? Not shun
Mhm,
it because it's something that they don't understand or
mhm.
something that they wouldn't do. Someone who would support you getting healthier.
And I'll throw this caveat too, because I've met so many people who are like, I don't support therapy or it didn't work for me. Try it more than once. I think you got to be mindful of trying it multiple ways. There's so many different types of therapies that you can take. There's so many
For
different types of
sure.
practitioners that you can experience. You could do therapy in person, you could do it online, you could do a hybrid version. There's just so many different ways to get the help that you need. Whether it be groups, groups are a great place to start too if you don't feel comfortable with
Just
one-on-one.
dip your toe in.
Those therapeutic groups where you can meet with other people who have shared experiences and are seeking to grow alongside one another. So just don't be discouraged and be open to trying new things.
And one thing that we've noticed with people who do, or one that my speculation or my hypothesis around when people start therapy is sort of underestimating what the experience might be like and not understanding that this is an investment in yourself and you don't get immediate gratification from an investment. It's not like you come in and then you leave a completely different way. It takes time, it takes intentionality. And if you look at it from the perspective of, I'm worth the time, I'm worth the intentionality to find the right therapist or to have someone help me find the right therapist or work with a social worker to find the right therapist, you're worth that time. Because if you do therapy right, you're going to go some deep places. You are going to go some deep places.
You're going to need breaks. You're going to need breaks too. It is not a sprint. You're going to need to take breaks. You're going to need to have a lot of fun to balance out the hard work of healing. That joy that we talked about, you're going to need a lot of that.
Yes.
It is really hard. And the deeper you get into it, just when you thought you turned a corner, you get into something else and you're like, oh my goodness. And so, like, having a community of people who are also on the same journey, who have, moderately the same amount of awareness or more than you, is going to be super helpful in normalizing the experience of healing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so worth it. And so, we were talking about epigenetics and passing down trauma and all those negative things, but we can also pass down healing, we can pass down well being.
You can interrupt it at any time.
And so it doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. And when you're doing this work, it's not just for you. It will make you better and it
Yeah.
will make the relationships that you have with other people better and the relationships you have with yourself better. But it's also going to make the people in your future better too. And so I want to
Mm-hmm.
highlight that. This has been such a wonderful conversation. It has really filled my cup a little bit and brought me so much joy. And I hope
Mm-hmm.
that our listeners have been able to learn something and take something away. And if they haven't, they can reach out to you directly, right? And book a
Mm-hmm.
figure out how they can make that happen for themselves. And as always, if y'all need or want to talk to me, I'm only one email away. All right. So we have our final question for today. I don't want our time to end. Oh.
Mm-hmm. I do have the warm and fuzzies right now, just so
I
you know. I
know.
do. I
I'll
do.
text you afterwards. We'll talk.
Yes.
All right. So, for child welfare and juvenile justice professionals listening in, what advice would you offer for supporting Black youth facing challenges like adultification and complex trauma, particularly in systems that they may not prioritize their emotional well being?
Oh, and that's the issue. It's the system. Like that's a really difficult
Name it.
um question to answer, and I have some answers, but I tend to be very solution oriented, so I know it's like it's not gonna solve it in and of itself. There's lots of unlearning that has to happen and a lot of national global changes that have to happen.
Absolutely.
I was actually listening to, I believe her name is Dorothy Roberts. She's the author of Torn Apart: How the Child Welfare System Destroys Black Families. And just getting a glimpse of her perspective of the origin of child welfare. And she worked with someone who became, I don't know what the correct term is, but became involved in the system just by simply taking her eyes off her child for a few minutes. The real challenges are within the racial biases and the discrimination. So it's really challenging, but I think it's also important to be honest about what the challenges are in the system. Be honest about what is not right. So that way the child won't think it's them. Like you don't want to have people internalize their experiences as if they're the problem.
You're so right. And in my capstone presentation a few days ago, I said that we need to name the problems. We need to speak clearly, directly, and plainly about the problems that exist, what roles we play in them, and how we're willing to address them. And I cannot reiterate that enough. We need to be very clear, very
Yeah.
direct, very concise in how we talk about these problems. And we have tangible solutions that we can do, but we need to name them firstly and foremost. And I would just reiterate too, we need to develop the emotional intelligence of our children, whether they be systems engaged or not. If we give them the tools that they need to bounce back from these traumatic events, to be able to process their feelings appropriately and get them out of their
Mm-hmm.
bodies and fully processed, we'll change the world. We could change. That would
Mm-hmm.
make the world a better
Mm-hmm.
place. If everyone cultivated more self-awareness and developed more emotional intelligence, the world would be a safer, better, healthier, happier place.
We would be a long way from where we at right now.
Mm, 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 mm. And on that
Yeah.
note,
Yeah.
on that note, it has been such a pleasure, my dear. I appreciate your
Yeah.
time. I appreciate your effort, not only today, but again, across your career for the work that you're doing to better the well-being of Black women and families. I appreciate you.
Mm-hmm.
If there's anything I can do to be an ally in your work, please don't hesitate to reach out to me and ask. And
For sure, girl. You doing the Lord's work. So thank
I'm just doing what I
you.
can do, one day at a time. This will not be the last time we do something together. That I promise. I'm making us a pinky promise right now. We're going. Yes, but thank you so so much. I hope you have happy holidays and thank you for being here today.
Bye.
The InnerViews podcast is a production of the Safe Camp Audio Network, which is a division of Youth Voices Rising via Fostering Media Connections. Please visit safecamp.audio.org on the web or Safe Camp Audio on all major social media. This podcast was produced and mixed by Christine Onjoko. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you consider sharing, subscribing, and or giving us a 5-star rating on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you download your podcast.